despite so many passionate practitioners worldwide, we stand at the moment on the precipice of two paths. If we keep walking forwards, then we are going to walk over a cliff that etches us and our generation in the history books, in the yoga history books, as the yogis that destroyed the yoga tradition. If we keep on walking forward in the same direction, yogically speaking, that we're walking now, we're going to be remembered as that culture. And I don't want to be remembered as that culture. I want to be one of the other ones that got to the precipice and then wised up and turned back and realized the error of my ways, because I've had many errors on this path. When I first got to Bali, it was Hollywood yoga on cocaine. Not real cocaine, but it was pretty amped up. It was, you know, arm balances in skinny jeans. It was the full works. So, you know, I'm guilty as charged. But that, you know, that has put a fire in my belly to not repeat those past discretions, but to make amends for my yogic actions and start sharing the tradition as it really deserves to be shared. Because it's such an extraordinary path. It's humanity's oldest science. It's non-religious. It is simply, quite simply, the science of self-excellence. That's what this path is. It's for everybody. But we have to do it in the right way in order for it to live up to those lofty statements. We have to do it correctly. And at the moment, we're at that cliff face where we're about to fall off as a collective. And I think if we go over it, there's going to be no coming back. So let's pump the brakes while we can. Take a moment, assess the situation realistically, get over this desire, this want, which I know so well, which is for yoga to be something fancy and sexy and fun and fitness oriented and about flexibility and about making the body stronger, because it's not about that. That's the mentality that's driving us over the cliff face. It's about spiritual evolution. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. So let's talk about that. But before we do that, let's chant the mantra, because the mantra is really, it says everything. It says, hey, let's practice. Let's honor this path, and in doing so, move from ignorance to truth, from darkness to light, from a fear of death to touching that part of ourself that is eternal. That's the essence of yoga. That's what we're going to talk about. So let that hit you as a feeling. If, well, regardless, if you want to chant it or not, please chant if you know it. But otherwise, just let it hit you as that intention, a group intention for tonight's session. The death and rebirth, but perhaps I was saying this morning, perhaps the lecture should have been called the death or rebirth of yoga in the modern world. Not and, because it's a fucking choice. It's no and, it's or. Are we going to kill it, or are we going to save it? We're going to rebirth it. We should rebirth it. It's worth it. So, let's chant. Om asatoma sat gamaya, tamasoma jyotir gamaya, mrityoma amritam gamaya. Deep breath in. Asatoma sat gamaya. gamaya vichurma amritam gamaya. Let's start with the double mountain diagram. And this is really based on, see that there's a plaque over there. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a plaque over there, which has had a very fascinating history. Don't freak out, but there's snakes under this floor. There's a family of big, beautiful black snakes that live under this floor. And there's little holes along here that they like to come out of and swim in the pond. And sometimes when we're really, really lucky, when the vibe is really good, they'll come and they'll just sit on that plaque there. We came in one and we had a YTT in here, and there was a huge snake skin on top of that plaque. That's when you know you're doing some good work. So that plaque over there, it says a couple of things on it, both relevant to the first diagram of the double mountains. But the first statement is where we'll start, and it says, it's the first verse of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So the Hatha Yoga Pradipika is basically the Yoga Bible. The Hatha Yoga Bible, I mean, yoga's huge, but the Hatha Yoga Bible was very, very skillfully written. Hatha Yoga, of course, is very, very old. It's archaeologically speaking, so we have archaeological evidence that dates this science, Hatha Yoga, back 6,000 years plus. Plus, we have all of the different oral traditions that say the same thing, that this is not 1,000 or 2,000 years old. It's many thousands of years old. And by archaeological evidence, I'm talking about the Indus Valley seals, which you can see in different museums across India, Delhi Museum, these plaques which have etchings of men and women doing asanas on them. Carbon dated many thousands, 6,000. They put it to 6,000 to 9,000 years old. That's amazing. And that aligns to what the lineages, the oral lineages tell us. That's as far back as we can track it through the oral traditions. But academics these days will say, well, we don't have a written reference until, texts like the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and Yoga Sutra and Hatha Yoga Pradipika. So the academics put the lifespan of yoga much closer to us, but actually it's way, way further. But at a certain point in history, the yogis realized that our memory was in a state of decline. They must have sensed cell phones coming in the next 1,000 years. So they said, shit, we better start writing this stuff down for these future generations that love to scroll. I'll say that as nicely as I can. So they did. And Swatmarama, he wrote down the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the Hatha Yoga Bible. And the very first verse says, Swatmarama says, salutations to Adi Nath. Nath means Lord. Adi means original. The original Lord of Yoga, Lord Shiva, who instructed Hatha Yoga, which is a light for those who want to climb the staircase to the highest state and stage of yoga, Raja Yoga, absorption into the light of the self. And then the whole text is unwrapping, unraveling that statement, that first seed in the first verse. Hatha Yoga is a stairway. It's not the end destination. It's a part of the journey. Hence the double mountain diagram. I used to consider myself a little bit of an artiste, but in later years, I've realized that that isn't so. It's not my dharma to be an artist. So I'm going to keep things relatively simple. This is a mountain. No? More or less. Okay, so let's have a look at mountain number one. This is called Rudrani Mountain. Rudrani is the technical name for Kundalini awakened at the navel center, born of the alchemical fusion of your heart and thigh energies into the pre-existing fire within your navel, which is called Jatara Agni. It's your physical, digestive, and assimilative force. So when we eat, the Jatara Agni in the navel, it allows us to break down the food and the drink that comes in, and we assimilate it and we transform it, hopefully, if the Jatara Agni is strong enough, into vitality and nutrients and nurturance. But then through this alchemical fusion of ha and tha, hata means to strike. It means to force, to bring two things together that usually wouldn't fit. The ha energies move upwards and the tha energies move downwards. In hatha yoga, we force them together. Hatha means force or to strike. Hatha, when we bring these energies together, there is a chain reaction. There is an alchemical explosion of the ha and tha energies into the pre-existing manipura fire or the Jatara Agni that amplifies it and causes the fire to reach deeper into our being, into the depths of our subconscious mind, into the chakras, into our energy body, where we hold our deepest programs, our deepest traumas from this life, and if you believe it, from all of the lives that we lived before this one. We bring those karmic seeds with us, and you can't get to those seeds with green smoothies. You can't. You can't even get to them with asana. We have to do the deeper work, and that's what Hatha Yoga is really, really about. So that's Rudrani. This is Rudrani Mountain. Rudrani Mountain has, of course, a base camp, and we call that base camp asana. The journey has begun. In Hatha Yoga Pradipika, asana is essentially the first chapter, first major chapter, asana. But then there's a whole thick-ass book, many chapters that come after that. So if we stop here, there's no way we're getting up the mountain, nor onto the next mountain, because you've got to climb this one to get onto that one. Because Hatha Yoga is a staircase. So Rudrani is all about Hatha Yoga. That's the goal of Hatha Yoga. Any Hatha Yoga practice that doesn't in some way address this idea of Rudrani or Kundalini awakened at the navel center does not qualify as real Hatha Yoga. Maybe it's preparation. Maybe it's forward folding and twist to build the thigh energy, the lunar energy, or back bends and laterals and inhale retention and Jalandhara Bandha to build the solar energies in the chest. That's great. That's preparation. That still qualifies. But if we're not working specifically to heal and develop and activate the solar energies, the lunar energies, or bring them into the fire, it's not Hatha Yoga. Just doing some postures is not Hatha Yoga, not even close. So what is Rudrani Mountain? What is the Hatha Yoga journey? It is asana. Next station, next part of the journey is called Kumbhaka. Kumbhaka means breath retention. All right, so we're opening the chest up with some back bends, breathing into the chest, holding the breath in. This is Kumbhaka, breath retention. Or we're folding forwards, breathing out, holding the breath out. This is Kumbhaka. Breathing in a little bit like we did today. Or what do we do today? Viloma on the exhale. Exhale 1/3. Pause. That's a retention. 2/3. Pause. That's a retention. This is Kumbhaka. Very important part as it relates to developing energy sensitivity and building up our pranic body. To amplify that further, we add Bandha. And this mountain is the same thing as we go along in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It's the same story, chapter by chapter, but here we're putting it in the example of a mountain. So now we hold the breath in and we apply Jalandhara Bandha. We lock the energy in. Because if we don't lock it in, what happens? All of that high energy just runs up into the brain and stimulates the thinking process. Don't even get me started about these ones. That's a lecture in and of itself. But don't do that. Adults practice Jalandhara Bandha. Why? Because that allows us to build prana, heart energy, safely in the chest, born of inhale and breath retention without disturbing the mind. As soon as we do this and we release that bandha, the prana blasts the brain, and it will make meditation and daily life actually very difficult, because the mind, the thinking mind, will always be stimulated. So Krishnamacharya, he added this move specifically for the demographic of 14, 15-year-old boys who are going through that very interesting puberty stage, that are very much obsessed and focused on their genitals. And he wanted them to bring energy up out of the genitals and get them in their minds a little bit more. It's a neat strategy. It's a cool strategy. But hey, I don't know about you, but my mind is already pretty busy. I got a fucking busy life. I got lots going on. I don't need it to be more busy as a result of my yoga practice. Hence, Jalandhara Bandha. Or fold forwards, hold the breath out, root lock, Mula Bandha. Okay, so this is the next stage of development in terms of our Hatha Yoga practice. And then right at the top, we have mudra. Mudra is where we combine all three of these elements, and sometimes even additional elements. Moves where we're, imagine I'm seated on the ground in a Janu Shushasana-like shape. Hold the breath in, Jalandhara Bandha, Mula Bandha, exhale. Hold the breath out, Uddiyana Bandha, stoke the fire, bring the heart and thought together. We hold that for 5 breaths, 10 breaths, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Krishnamacharya says the ultimate goal for a Hatha Yogi or Yogini is to hold the Maha Mudra for 32 minutes per side. Because in that, we get everything. Everything that the whole mountain offers us, we get it in a single move. That's the Maha. Maha means great, supreme, the Maha Mudra. And all of this is for this purpose, the purpose of Kundalini. But not Kundalini as in we want more Kundalini. That's also a misunderstanding. What does Kundalini mean? It means coiled energy, compressed energy, unprocessed karmic load. Where? Lower 3 chakras. So what we're doing in Hatha Yoga is we are uncoiling the Kundalini. When it uncoils through this production of pranic fire born of the fusion of heart and thought energies, when that happens, the liberated Kundalini, or the Kundalini, transforms into what's called Prana Shakti, or what we call in Hatha Yoga more specifically Rudrani. Rudrani is Prana Shakti activated at the navel, which previously in its coiled state we called Kundalini Shakti, compressed energy. And all of Hatha Yoga is singularly about that. What does Rudrani give us? 3 things. Rudrani gives us a liberation from age-old fears, whether the fears are expressing themselves directly as fear or some subdivision of fear. It might be anger or rage or jealousy or anxiety or addiction or aversion. Rudrani is the antidote. Secondly, because energy never dies and only transforms, that dense energy, which previously was an obstacle to spiritual growth, then becomes your personal creative power. What once was a hindrance now becomes a supreme benefit. In the Gospel of Thomas, it says, if you bring forward that which is within you, that which you bring forward will save you. If you cannot bring forward that which is within you, that which is within you will destroy you. That's Kundalini Talk 101. That power is either going to destroy us or we're going to liberate it, transform it, and it's going to become our salvation, our destiny fuel. And the third thing is that once a certain amount of this lower chakra karma has been liberated, It opens up the pathway, the staircase, as Swatmarama tells us, the staircase to the higher chakras. Salutations to the Adinat, the primal guru Shiva, who instructed Hatha Yoga, which is a light for those who want to climb the staircase and arrive to the highest state and stage of yoga, Raja Yoga, absorption into the light of the self. Hatha Yoga makes Raja Yoga, or meditation, access to the higher chakras possible. There is no sidestepping our karma. Doesn't matter how many cacao ceremonies, cross cuddle puddles, ayahuasca journeys, toad licking we do. At some point, we're going to have to come back and manage our karmic load. How? Fire. There are many ways to do that. That's why every religion, every spiritual path that I'm aware of has the inclusion of fire in some way into its rituals, because fire is the great transformer. But Hatha Yoga have made this into a supreme science. So, this is the next mountain. That we can only access from the pinnacle of Rudrani mountain. As the Hatha Yoga Pradipika says, this one is called Samadhi mountain. Now, with the lower mind, so lower chakra is lower mind, we can talk about that interchangeably because it's the same thing. We're just addressing those karmic impressions energetically or mentally, but they're the same thing. Once the lower mind, lower chakras, have been dealt with sufficiently through being processed by fire, then meditation becomes a real conversation. Until then, most likely, unless you're just born gifted, born very awake to some degree, then the lower mind stuff may not be interfering with you. But for most of us, and for myself certainly, I can't just sit down and meditate and expect samadhi. I have to go through the process of working the lower mind into this subdued state, amplifying my fire, opening up this pathway, and then directly going into one of these higher chakras for the purpose of meditation. Then it lands. Otherwise, it doesn't land. From the yoga perspective, on this mountain, we have 3 stations. The lowest station is called Kriya meditation. Kriya meditation is using sacredly charged inner symbols, an internal flame, a downward-facing blue triangle, a multicolored disc of light spinning clockwise in the navel. Things which are accessible to our minds because we know the shape. I know what a triangle is. I know what a flame looks like, but we convert it into a subtle thought form and then meditate on it to extract its goodness, its essence. That's stage 1. Relatively easy meditation, and that's why Kriya meditation is connected to Hatha Yoga. You come to the classes here, 9 times out of 10, at the end of practice, you're going to do your asana, a little bit of pranayama, and then you'll do a meditation kriya. This is the first doorway into meditation because it's very, very accessible. A little harder is what we call mantra japa. This is the next station up. This is harder because now we have to absorb the mind so completely into silent sound frequencies, Om Bhur-Bhuva Suvaha, Om Triambakam Yajamahe, and have our concentration power and our pranic sensitivity so complete that we can penetrate within, beneath, below the peripheral container of the meditation object, which is its syllables, and get to the core essence, the soul, the frequency, the feeling, the intelligence that exists within the mantra itself. It's harder than just meditating on a downward-facing blue triangle. The goal is the same. We want to get the mind absorbed. This is what samadhi means. Get the mind absorbed into the subtle essence of the meditation object. Mantra is harder, but the payoff is bigger. because these mantras, man, they hold some major Shakti. If you can get your mind linked in and absorbed into the subtle essence of one of these high caliber mantras, you will transform yourself very, very quickly. And then the highest point on mountain number 2 is called Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga is more tricky again. This is even subtler. Raja Yoga is considered using, it's described as this, using the subtlest thing in manifest creation as the meditation object. What is that? It's our own higher mind. It's a system that objectifies our own higher mind. What does that look like? It means producing a pranic pulsation at the center of the forehead infused with 4 qualities: presence, beauty, higher awareness, and luminosity. If you can get those 4 frequencies compressed into one singular point at the center of your forehead and compress those energies so completely that the point begins to pulse, and then you take a step back and you meditate on that pulsation, and then through your concentration power and your meditation skills, you get yourself absorbed back into the higher mind, you're cooked. You're done. That's the highest goal. That's what Swadharma is saying. Raja Yoga, the highest state and stage, because it's both. It is a state and it is a stage. It's a technique. Raja Yoga is a very clear technique, and it's also a very lofty experience. Mental absorption or samadhi into the higher mind. Patanjali calls this Asmita. If you've read Yoga Sutra, then you'll know Asmita and Ananda Samadhi. If you want to learn a little bit more about Raja Yoga, where's Jason? When are you doing Raja Yoga? What days? Tuesday afternoon, Saturday morning. You want to learn the Rolls Royce of meditation techniques? Go and check out Jason on Tuesday or Saturday. Right. This is the highest technique driven practice we can aspire towards. And what Patanjali and the other great masters, Swadharma and the others, are saying is we need technique. You have to have technique. They're saying we use technique. Buddha's saying I use technique. Patanjali's saying I use technique. I use this technique. Use it. That's Raja Yoga, but Buddha called it Vishoka meditation. So this is the goal. And then beyond that, then you're home. But right now, my dear brothers and sisters on the path, we're not even on the mountain. We're not even on the mountain. We're down here. This is a graveyard. There's another bloody tombstone over here. One says V, one says T. Just as examples. This is the Vinyasa tombstone. And this is the Tantra tombstone. Vinyasa, and you can't see it, but there's a little bit of text down here. It's very small. I don't think you can see it. Can you see it? I'll spell it out for you. It says, on the tombstone, both of them, it says, they died for their sins. Yeah, V. That's what it says on the tombstones. So in terms of what sins they committed, in terms of vinyasa, it's practiced in a way where there is no understanding of the energetic impact of the postures being done. None. But this is an energetic science. Instead, we're focused on anatomical alignment. We're focused on creative sequences. Dear Lord in heaven. Creative sequencing. Flexibility. Shoulder opening. Hamstring stretching. This is not Hatha Yoga. This is not asana. That's the sin. And then the sin of modern day Tantra Neo-Tantra, whatever you want to call it, is trying to convince the yogis and yoginis of today that Tantra has something to do with sex. And it certainly does not. There is 0.1% of Tantra that deals with sex. And if you knew what it was, you wouldn't want to do it. You'd fucking run a mile. Because it's nothing like what's going on at the workshops and the workbooks and the couples retreats and triples retreats and whatever else retreats. It's nothing like that. In sexual Tantra, you would never be initiated into it. It's called the left-handed path. Varma Marga. You would never be initiated into it unless you've already climbed these, not just this mountain, both mountains. You wouldn't be initiated. You wouldn't even have the capacity to find the master to initiate you because they're not on Instagram. They're not in Ubud running workshops. It's not that kind of a situation. The first practice of Varma Marga is called Shivalata Mudra, where the man will sit cross-legged position and a woman will sit on his left thigh. The woman will hold the man's genitals and he will cup the woman's left breast for 3 hours without moving, reciting mantra. 3 hours. Most yogis today can't even sit still for 10 fucking minutes, let alone 3 hours. So let's just put it off the table because we don't need it. Because if we master this and this, asana, pranayama, mudra, kriya, japa, raja, everything that we do has a sacred essence to it then. The way that we relate, the way that we make love, the way that we sequence our asana classes, it all becomes sacred. But, you know, we've been convinced that, hey, you know, Tantra is about sex. It isn't about sex. It's about energy mastery. And at the very least, first, we have to master our own. At the very least, then maybe you find a master. But, hey, if you do, pretty quickly after that, you're going to find yourself hanging out in graveyards, meditating on top of corpses, holding a bloody skull and having your acai smoothie bowls out of a half-cut skull. Because that's left-handed Tantra. It's that hardcore. And if you want a little bit of expertise on the matter, far beyond mine. I'm just a babe in the woods in that regard. But there is a great book called Agora by Robert Svoboda. Read that book if you have any doubts about the reality of what Tantra is and what it isn't. Okay. Now, I'm big on, you know, why? Why is it like this? If we're going to do something, if we're going to put in decades of dedicated daily work, climbing these mountains, we want to know why. I'll show you why. Let's circle that. Let's circle that. And let's circle that. Because these three circles speak to the three aspects of what we are, or what our soul, what our consciousness, Purusha, is wrapped within, our vehicle. Our vehicle is part mind, higher and lower. It is energy. And it is physical body. And these mountains address, in that order, these differing degrees of densification that cloak us. Whether we look at this through the map of Samkhya philosophy or the map of the koshas, it's the same map. We are pure consciousness, unchanging, cruising around in these epic vehicles that are not one-dimensional. They're multi-dimensional vehicles. They're fucking Lamborghinis. They're not, you know, Honda Civics. All right, we can roll with that. That's fine. Yeah, let's keep going. Okay. So now let me shift to another diagram. Where is that even coming from? It feels very close, doesn't it? All right, perfect. So let's go back to that same conversation. We are pure consciousness. Let's use the Samkhya map, very brief one. In the YTT, we'll do this in a much more elaborate way because Samkhya is profoundly beautiful and complex and amazing. But just to give you a little sense of what this map of the descent of consciousness into matter looks like, let me just make it brief. So pure consciousness. In the yoga tradition, we call this part of our being Purusha, the part that is always at rest and never changes. You, me, everybody, particularly if you're here listening to this and you have a genuine interest in evolving yourself spiritually and doing good things for humanity in the world while you're here, you're not here on some bullshit karmic track just to come here and be mediocre. If you are interested in this sort of stuff, then you have something deeper burning inside of you. Your job is to figure out what that is and then how to bring it into manifestation. That burning desire is called Mahad, the great idea that birthed you into material manifestation. It wasn't a fluke. Your being here is very, very intentional. You are here on a spiritual mission, whether you want to embrace that or not. That's why you're here. And let's just take the word spiritual out of there because that can be a little bit vague. You are here on a mission to make the world a better place when you leave than when you got here. That's the mission. That seed that brought you here is called Mahad, the great idea that you are. Based on that idea, you manifested yourself intentionally into these Lamborghini-style vehicles that are 3 layers thick. And there's layers within layers, of course. This is what we'll look at a little bit more deeply on the training. But essentially, as we looked at in the previous diagram, your vehicle is made up of mind, energy, and matter, or physical body. From the subtle to the dense. That's how we manifest. The issue that's quite compelling music. It's putting me into a mood, and it's not the mood that I really want to be in right now. But you just gotta go with it. Okay, because of this process of densification, and because by the time we have cloaked ourselves in a mind, in a personality, our personality is called the ahamkara. With a supreme, our higher mind is called the buddhi mind. So the buddhi mind is the part of the mind that exists in closest proximity to your mahad, the essence of who you are. So the buddhi is like a window between the higher mind and soul. When we come in, that is squeaky fucking clean. And the transmission is direct. As is our dharmically or our mahad calibrated personality. Kids come in perfectly attuned to their spiritual missions. In the same way, here at the level of chakra, vayu, nadi, we come in perfectly calibrated, energetically speaking, to our singular soul mission, our reason for being here. This can be calculated. This is a whole science called Jyotisha. Jason, again, if you want to know what your dharmic frequencies are, if you want to know what your dominant chakra energies are, the ones that are aligned to your reason for being here, go speak to Jason again. Likewise, at this level, Our doshas and our nervous system are completely calibrated to this spiritual reason for being here. Completely. We come in a perfect vehicle ready to manifest great things in this world based on our soul desires. But because of this process of constant densification, wrapping ourselves in more and more dense layers, and by the time we get down here into the physical body, the result quite often is people are left asking the big questions, like, who am I actually? I don't know. Particularly after so many years of schooling, growing up in cultures that aren't necessarily spiritual. Like in Australia, football's the only religion you're allowed to, that's the religion. If you don't have a football team, you're a weirdo. What? It's like you see people and they'll kind of glitch like, what do you mean you don't barrack for anyone? Like it's not even a question. Of course, man, that's a huge part of the identity. So when we start having these questions, because we've been programmed or educated in ways that are less than what we truly are and what we came here to achieve, these go offline. They go offline. All of this goes offline. The ahamkara becomes what's called the asmita. This is your manufactured personality, the one which you have collected from little pieces of your mom and your dad and your friends at school and your culture and religion and pop culture and everything else, and sticky taped it onto yourself. Because a part of the mind, the ahamkara part of the mind, it must create a self-identity. That part is designed to create a self-identity based around your mahad. But if that pathway is shut off because of mental programming and conditioning at a young age specifically, then we just grab whatever's around us. We become like our mothers and fathers. We become like our teachers at school. We become like our mates in high school. And this window becomes very, very cloudy. We lose sight of the soul. We lose sight of why we're here, and we end up with these questions. That's okay. That's kind of that's the fun part. According to Tantra, this is intentional, man. Don't get down about it. This is intentional. Because if the soul's greatest desire in this manifest world is to have these moments of revelation and soul remembrance, you can only have that from a cloaked perspective. We have to cloak ourselves and forget if we want to have the joy of remembering. So even though it sucks because this causes a lot of pain, you can see this dude's in pain right now. Oh, heavy, man, sad. Never fear. The yogis to the rescue. So the yogis, in all of their glory, in all of their brilliance, developed a science to heal, purify, strengthen, but ultimately transcend the physical body. And they called that asana. Another system connected to the first to heal, purify, strengthen, and ultimately transcend the energy body. And that, my friends, is called pranayama. And finally, the top of the mountain. See, it's just a mountain reworked into a new diagram. It's the same mountain. Meditation to heal, to purify, to strengthen, and ultimately transcend the mind and allow us to reconnect to the truth of who we are. Take away that frown, buddy. Take away that question mark. Now we're living. I wish I had a lighter. That would have been perfect. And through this process, we resharpen the buddhi. We recalibrate our personality to the truth of who we are. We reorganize our chakras, bring them to life so they can serve us. We strengthen our body, purify our body, make it a fit physical vehicle for us to get around in. And that's why we do what we do on the mat and the meditation cushion. There's nothing random about it. There's no creative sequencing. It's a science. It is the most perfect science. It's our science. It's humanity's science of remembering who we are, why we're here, and what we've come here to achieve. That's it. That's it. I mean, I could go on. I could go on. But that's pretty much all you need to know in terms of why we do what we do. I mean, all right. Is that enough? Is that clear enough? Or do you want more? Okay, let's keep going. If we're going to do this, let's do it properly. To do it properly, asana needs to be done in the following way. We need to split the asanas into categories that aren't bullshit categories, like standing poses, arm balances, shoulder openers. That doesn't matter because that doesn't tell us anything about the energetics of the pose. So we break the poses down into these categories: forward folds, twists, laterals, back bends, extensions, and inversions. 6 categories. And this has 2 functions. Function number 1 is to stabilize the mind. Patanjali in Yoga Sutra does not say much about asana practice. He really gives us 3 statements, 4 if you include when he just gives it in a list. Asana, all right. Number 3, asana. 4, 5, But 3 actual sutras about asana in the entire Yoga Sutra, which is considered the final authority on all things yoga. The final authority, everything that we want to know about yoga is in Yoga Sutra. Everything. 196 very precise and concise statements about the whole yoga world. 3 statements about asana. And none of those statements have to do with flexibility or tightening your abs. It's all about using asana as a way to stabilize the mind. So that's the first way that we need to start reworking asana to align with its original functionality. Asana for the cultivation of mental steadiness. And how do we do that? How do we practice in a way? How do we practice asana in a way that cultivates mental steadiness? Uh-oh, you're not going to like this. You have to do less asanas and hold them for longer. Less asana, hold them for longer, stop fidgeting, increase calmness, and learn to rest in witness consciousness as you're holding. It's the opposite of modern day flow yoga, hot yoga, Bikram yoga, vinyasa yoga. Less poses, longer holds, no fidgeting, no moving, be still, stop blinking, stop moving. Increase your calmness. Patanjali says to master asana, loosen your effort. Stop gripping, stop sweating all over your bloody yoga mat. Just relax. Effortless effort. And meditate on that which is infinite, which is our own witnessing consciousness. That's asana from the perspective of real yoga. And orientation number 2 is to understand the energetics. So energy management. Board number 2, just to give you a little quick overview of what that is. So all these pose categories here, let's go forward fold, twist, lateral, back bend, extension, inversion. When we look at true yoga, we understand that these 6 pose categories, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 6 pose categories will impact our vayus, doshas, gunas, chakras, as a standing pose tells us nothing. This is a standing pose, but so is this, but so is this, and so is this. That's 4 different pose categories, all standing poses. So that tells us nothing about the energetic impact of poses, nothing. But whether we're doing a forward fold standing, a forward fold seated, or a forward fold up on our hands, the energetic impact will always be the same. But all of these are different. They express themselves very differently. For example, with the vayus, apana will be activated through forward folds. The doshas will be kapha. Kapha. Guna will be tamas. The chakras will be 1, 2, 3. Nervous system will be parasympathetic. General energetics will be something called langana, which means to reduce. Whereas if we go down here to backbends, and let's do it in red because red's more appropriate for backbends, it's completely different energetics. At the level of the vayus, it's pran. Doshas, pitta. Yes, pitta. Gunas, rajas. Chakras, 3, 4, and 5. Nervous system, sympathetic nervous system. And the energetic impact of Brahmana, which means to increase and amplify. So you can see just how different on absolutely every level forward fold postures are to backbend postures. What if we don't know that? And let me tell you this, because I've been around the traps for a while, 99% of yoga teachers today don't know this map. Therefore, what's being taught is dangerous. Because whatever we do to our energy body, we do to our mind, because you can't shape one without shaping the other. But if we know this, then we can craft the most skillful, most potent, and safe practices for ourselves and for others. If we don't know this, it's really just shooting in the dark. It really, really is. But this is the state of modern yoga. This alone is bringing us to the precipice. One more step, and we're over. Even the blue checkmark yoga teachers, even the ones with the massive followings, thousands and thousands at their, festival classes and hundreds at their workshops, most of them wouldn't be able to sequence in a Panavayu practice to save their lives. That's how close to the cliff base we are. Once we're practicing asana correctly in a way that stabilizes the mind, has a fundamental deep understanding of working with energy, then at this level, we're working with our kumbhaka, our bandha, just to bring it back around to the mountain analogy, and ultimately our mudra, for the purpose of, 1, increasing pranic sensitivity. 2, building prana. And ultimately 3, activating Rudrani. Once we've done that and we've strengthened, healed, purified, then we're ready to transcend beyond the energy level. Then we come up. Now we're back at Samadhi Mountain. We're with our Kriya practice, our Japa practice, and ultimately our Raja practice. 2, clear and strengthen buddhi. It's a wild playlist, no? It's like, who are these people? Clear and strengthen the buddhi. Realign to Mahat. Live in truth. That's it. That's the map of yoga. That's the double yoga mountain map, looked at in 2 different ways, in the hope that by doing it slightly differently, it'll land a little bit deeper. Last thing, speaking of mountains, I'm going to finish with a story. The story is the story of Bharadvaja. Have you heard of Bharadvaja? It's one of the great Saptarishis, or 7 great sages of the Vedic era. So there's a pose named after this sage, Bharadvajasana A and B. It's a twist. So if we look at what twists give us in terms of vayus, twists will give us samana vayu. Samana vayu is our digestive and assimilative force. So we know that the Bharadvaja story is going to be something about assimilation. And it is. Bharadvaja is the greatest scholar and student on the earth. Studies. And by the end of his first lifetime, has learnt more from the Vedas, more about yoga than any other person alive. And he's certain that when he gets to his deathbed, Shiva will come for him. Adinath, the primordial guru, will come and say, "Great job, sir. You're coming with me to Kailash, and we'll hang out there all day long, drink tea, smoke chillums, and whatever else." But not only does that not happen, but at the end of his first life, as he's lying on his deathbed, Shiva comes and is quite pissed at him. And Bharadvaja says, "Take me, Shiva." And he says, "Nope." Turns his back on Bharadvaja and walks the other way. Bharadvaja gets another rebirth as himself. And he thinks, shit, I've got to learn more. So he locks himself away in his little hidey hole, and he studies, learns more and more, doubles his knowledge. Shiva comes again at the end of this second life and says, "Not even close." Turns away, mortified. Tries again. He triples the amount that he learns. And this time at the end of his life, Shiva is fucking pissed. And he comes to his deathbed and he's like, "What are you doing?" He said, "But what? I've learned more. I've learned 3 times more than any person who's ever lived." And Shiva says, "Listen, buddy." He picks up a little pile of dirt from the ground. He says, "This is how much you learned in your first life. This much. This is how much you learned in your second life." And he grabs a bigger pile. "And this is how much you learned in your third life. And you see that mountain out there. That's how much there is to learn." What? How am I going to learn that much? I've done nothing else but lock myself away and study. And Shiva says to him, "You don't learn through studying. You learn through sharing. When you share the knowledge that you already have, you assimilate that knowledge into wisdom. And then you understand the mountain. And not until then."